Hello everyone, this is a new series here. We're calling it a Rainy Day Chat. It's for Infinite Rainy Day. And it's going to be a little different from our other shows we have here. Like, Heavy Storms is a comedic podcast about bad anime, obviously. And we have Indie Cent for just cheap gaming, stuff we know, stuff we don't. But I wanted to do something a bit more personal and positive than we have in the past, which is why I bring up this series. This is going to be a regular Infinite Rainy Day podcast where we have a rotating panel and host, and the host gets to decide what the panel is going to read, watch, play, whatever, as long as it's some form of Japanese media or Japanese-inspired media. It's basically a way for us to share our favorites with each other and you, the audience. And for this first episode, I decided to keep things simple by just inviting Tom here.
Hello.
And we will be talking about something for this first episode, I knew I wanted to do something really special. So I invited Tom here to talk about SUDA 51's The Silver Case, because I think he might be the only person on staff other than me who would genuinely like this.
And you were correct.
Oh yes, SUDA 51. I really did want to do something special for this episode, so I wanted something pretentious and weird and bizarre, because I don't think there's a better way to put down my taste than that, along with horny, because, well, SUDA 51. And before we get into our main chat, I'm going to have a little opening segment here. We'll see how it goes for the first episode and see if we'll make a return. We will be talking about recent things we've been into lately, and I went ahead and picked two things that I think are semi-related to what we're going to talk about. But before we get to that, let's hear what Tom picked out.
Yeah, I guess there were two things of late that I found interested in. One is kind of basic and the other a little more specialized. I've been enjoying the new Mario game, Mario Odyssey, which
I've been seeing that everywhere.
Yeah, it's a Mario game. I'm sure people are familiar with what Mario games entail, so that's not really the weird thing about it. I think what makes this Mario so entertaining and why it's caught on virally of taking photos and everything is because it does some really weird juxtapositions between Mario and animals and creatures that look like they have a different design ethic. Like, you've probably seen the pictures of Mario walking around with real people, or people.
And they're talking like Sims.
Yeah, they look like Sims. Mario is half as tall.
Yeah, I saw a Peanut Butter Gamer video that came out recently, and there was a scene where Mario was just stuck in a giant crowd of these not people being pulled around.
Yeah,
and so bizarre.
Yeah, and so the whole game is like that. You have the Mayor Pauline, who's the Donkey Kong character, the woman who rescued from Donkey Kong so many years ago, and that's canonical. In the game, she references the past of having been kidnapped by Donkey Kong, and she's risen to be mayor. And the city still has construction sites. Just a couple of them, and it's just like, okay, was this when this city was being built? Is that when you were kidnapped? And she's kind of like a cross because she's as tall as all the Sim people, so Mario is very short compared to her, but she has the cartoony face. And there's a whole bunch of other little things, I don't want to spoil all of them, but you've probably seen he will capture a photorealistic dinosaur. Like a real T-Rex, like a Jurassic Park T-Rex, that exists in the same canon as Yoshi. So it's just, you have, and the game allows you to take pictures of anything, and even do little clips, 30-second clips. They added that, so you'll have people being able to do a 30-second. Oh, and there's costumes too. So you'll have Mario dressed up as a pirate, playing with a dog that looks like a photorealistic dog, and then going to talk to a person in a suit, and then jumping on a Goomba. And it's just like, none of this is the same. Like it plays with the weird discrepancy between things that don't look like they should belong together, and the whole game is like that. And so that, I think, what makes it so why people like take photos and put filters on them and post them upon the internet so much, just because there's so many weird things you can stage that you never really see in a game like that before. So that's fun.
I'd argue against that, since the Sonic series has done photorealistic people too.
Yeah, I guess that is true.
Done it worse.
Yeah, there was that whole 2006 Sonic, or 2008.
And even before that, with the Sonic Adventure era, was filled with stuff like that, like Shadow's reason for being the way he was, that he lost a girl named Maria, and she looked just like a.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm wrong about. I guess we've never seen it with Nintendo before. The Dreamcast was always ahead, but
yeah, I think it comes down to aesthetics, because Mario meshes way better with real people because he's so silly and goofy looking.
Yeah.
While Sonic, not so much.
Yeah.
Like that, and I think they decided to make Eggman realistic for like Sonic 06, and that was a bad call.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing, and I mean, it's also a solid game, and Sonic games, it didn't really translate to 3D all that well, so.
Yeah, I do some arguing there, but yeah, I do get what you mean. I think Sonic Heroes is about the only one of them that worked, and even that has some problems if you don't know what you're doing.
I mean, I enjoyed the Sonic Adventure games, but the people who said they go back and they're not. I mean, I've heard even Nintendo 60, Mario 64. If you go back and play it now, it's unplayable, and I can believe that to a certain extent, based on how much of that's based on guesswork.
I think it's worth mentioning that Sonic Unleashed, while everyone remembers for the Werehog, was basically had the basic same concept as Odyssey here, in that you traveled around the world and meeting people of all different cultures. The difference is that for that game they decided to make the people cartoonish, which just left it boring looking.
Yeah.
So they learned one lesson, but it ended up being the wrong lesson.
Oh well.
But it's interesting, in 2017, the new Mario game is all happy and excited about traveling the world, and the new Sonic game within the second level has Sonic being tortured for 6 months at a black site owned by Eggman.
Are you kidding me?
Sonic, I knew that was coming, because Sonic Forces is just going straight in on the dark, edgy Sonic bullshit.
Oh no, it's so terrible, because Nintendo's decided to go the opposite. Nintendo's never done the dark stuff, but it's...
Well, if you've played the Mario RPGs, they have done it a lot.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't mean like the SNES one or Paper Mario. I mean Paper Mario 2 and just like the entire Mario and Luigi series.
Yeah, I think I've only played like one of those, so maybe I've missed out on...
The second Mario and Luigi game is kind of bad because they upped the difficulty for the US release, and by that I mean they gave all the bosses ridiculous health bars, so it goes on forever and it's annoying. But it has a genuinely kind of messed up story and revolving around parasitic aliens. Like they just outright took stuff from the H.R. Geiger book and made it Mario.
Huh.
It's so weird, because that's the one where you get to meet Mario and Luigi as babies and control both teams of them at the same time, and that's the one with the parasite aliens.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know if I got to play that one.
It's great. I love that series so much. But yeah, I really want to get a Switch one day, but I'm also not that excited about console gaming anymore. Because, I mean, like, the new Call of Duty, which goes back to World War II, which I was like, oh, maybe this will be good. And, the crates.
Yeah.
There's, like, a daily requirement in multiplayer to look at people opening the loot boxes on the beach in Normandy.
Yeah, I saw that. That was so bizarre.
Video games.
Yeah.
But yeah, at least Nintendo's actually doing something right in this hell of an industry.
Yeah, there's...
what's the other thing you brought up?
The other thing was a movie that I sort of wanted to watch for a long time, but after the first Koike Lupin movie, being partially inspired by it, I decided I wanted to check it out. And it just so happened to be on Netflix, and they don't usually have very many movies left anymore. So I finally saw Eyes Wide Shut, the last Kubrick film, and not going in expecting much, I found that I did kind of enjoy it. Dated in a lot of ways, not just because it's 1999, but it's based on a story that came out in the 1920s about a married couple in 1920s Austria. So it's kind of weird seeing these fairly conservative social values troubling a hip couple in New York. Like, oh, what if my wife thinks about another man besides me? And it's like, you've never dealt with that before, Tom Cruise? I mean, it's just weird, like, these hip rich New Yorkers are like, have like quaint Victorian morals or whatever, but there's some really effective scenes, and of course you have the crazy manor house sequence, which was what the Koike movie referenced, with everybody wearing the strange masks, and that was just an incredibly effective horror sequence.
Actually, now that you mention it, I noticed that mask thing pops up a lot in anime these days.
Apparently, the movie did really well in Japan, so I think it may have influenced.
Oh, so it's like a Blade Runner situation.
Yeah, that's definitely the most memorable scene in the movie. Everything else is kind of more low key, and if someone referenced it, it wouldn't necessarily come across. But yeah, it's this really creepy mansion sequence where they're like chanting and they're masked, and he's kind of walking around and he's not supposed to be there, and that's like extremely well done, and it's the masks and the chanting. It's not like the whole orgy thing that's like disturbing part of it. It's just they apparently took like a Romanian Orthodox mass and then like reversed it so it sounds like they're chanting gibberish, and it's the creepiest thing ever. So yeah, I can understand why that would be a big memorable scene. That, like, I think I remember, like, what was it that called? It just got put up on Crunchyroll. It's Speed Grapher. I think that also.
Oh God, Speed Grapher.
Yeah, I think that also referenced it, because yeah, it was a big movie in Japan, and
yeah, Speed Grapher came out around a similar time, like the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah, so I definitely like tracking down all these movies that influence anime, like what was it, Streets of Fire. That was another movie in America that didn't really make any waves. In Japan, it was a big hit and like inspired the opening sequence to Bubblegum Crisis. And stuff like Blade Runner, of course, obviously, and Alien, obviously, influenced anime. But yeah, this low-key seems to have inspired a lot of things, so it was good to see it, and I did basically enjoy it. I felt it wrapped up a little too tidily, and it would be a lot more memorable if it kind of had a mind-bender ending, but since he died
yeah, it just went like...
Yeah, he like died 6 days after he like turned in the final cut, so...
Oh, I thought, if I remember correctly, the ending, they're kind of back together, but it's clearly not going well, and the lady just ends with a final length, like, saying, "We're going to fuck."
Yeah, that's it. It's just kind of weird, and he changes it from taking place at Mardi Gras to taking place at Christmas. So it's a creepy Christmas movie, and I really appreciate that because I love the aesthetics of Christmas movies, but I don't like their schmaltziness. So if you ever have a dark Christmas movie like Brazil, I love that. I love like unhappy Christmas movies.
You should check out Krampus. That one's actually considered really good. It has a lot of effects you don't see nowadays. It's the type, it's like a B movie from the 80s that just suddenly appeared in our timeline, but like for sort of like a family movie, kind of. It's very weird.
I'll have to check that out. But yeah, those are the two things. Both the weird aesthetics and the creepy cults thing, I guess both do have some bearing on the silver case. So,
yeah, that's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
For me, I went ahead and picked two things that both deal with meta horror narratives, but they both deal with it in different ways. The first one I want to mention is one is a webcomic I've been following for a little while because I heard someone say it's kind of like Homestuck, and well, you know me. That comic is called Awful Hospital, and the title is very apt. It's a very strange series. It's drawn sort of like a Butch Hartman cartoon, the Fairly Odd Parents guy, except like if the artist could actually draw profiles and also drew a lot of gore. It starts with this woman waking up, and for some reason she looks completely green, like some sort of amoeba, but otherwise she looks like a normal person. And she's in this strange hospital populated entirely by living body parts, like a skull on a bed, a gaping wound, just a pile of veins, stuff like that. But they're all genuinely friendly people to talk to, and it's just so bizarre. And she's looking for her baby son, and it's implied very early that something weird is going on. Especially because it's set up like Homestuck originally was, where there was what you do is when you're on the comic, you can type stuff in the comments to give suggestions of what this character should do. And at points in the comic, it would like make jokes like Homestuck would, with like the character being sort of aware of it and like no. But it takes this seriously and turns it into a plot point where the people commenting on the comic become a part of the story. Like they're people from another plane conversing with this character and other characters if there's like ever a switch in perspective, which happens sometimes. And it becomes very strange from there. It's interesting because like the writer of the comic even admitted that he likes this system because sometimes the audience will come up with solutions not even he considered.
You're right.
Like when this door was trying... is like some sort of being working for the true villain in the comic is trying to like brainwash her. One of the commenters suggested, hey, take that out of order sign you took from one of the doors earlier and put it on that door. And so she does it, and it actually works, and the door is no longer possessed. And that was just like the moment I knew I loved this comic. It's very interesting because it's like really funny. Like there's literally a gif at one point where it's like parroting a Final Fantasy boss battle, and a flea lady like cast reverse healing, and then a giant gun appears and shoots the bad guy. But on the other hand, there's a lot of talk of like existential dread. Like there's one really messed up part where they have to literally create life out of this like inanimate object in order for it to go on a basically suicide mission to kill itself so they can continue on, and it's just all happy to do it because it hasn't really known existence for all that long. And just like little messed up things like that. But the actual story of it is, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a lot of secrets at the hospital, a lot of stuff going on with the seemingly normal parts of it. And it's basically taking place in this other dimension populated by various eldritch beings that aren't necessarily good or bad, they just are. But there's something else in the hospital that's upsetting the balance of things and is trying to take over. And then and I should also mention there is one other human character you meet. This complete shitbag of a guy. Like, this woman's seeing the hospital like you would see like a point-and-click adventure game. He's seeing it like a first-person shooter. And he's actually been killing hospital people and burying them in the walls so they can't respawn. And this is where things get really messed up and interesting. It's hard to describe, but there's some truly, like, jaw-dropping moments. And, like at one point, she opens a door, and all you see is a black void for a few pages. And then on the last page, when you're there's a lot to scroll through, so you decide to scroll, and then you start hearing noise slowly building, and as you scroll through the page, you start seeing things, like weird, indescribable things, and there's just like a cacophony of sound coming at you, and it's just like, wow. I'd highly recommend it. Just be warned, it kind of fucks with you a lot. But yeah, the other one, you looked it up?
Oh yeah, I looked up some of the images, like it was like promotional art of it, and it definitely had an interesting style. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, there's like a doctor who's just like a gigantic guy, but his head is like a therapeutic needle or something. But yeah, the other thing I've been looking at lately is something that came out just this year, like a few months ago. It's a free visual novel called Doki Doki Literature Club.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
Who hasn't heard about this?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, for those not in the know, this is a visual novel. I was surprised by this, made by someone who used to work on that Project M mod for like Super Smash Bros. Melee. Super Smash Bros. Brawl, to make it more like Melee and just include a bunch of weird shit. Like that Sephiroth Pooh Bear image you see around. But anyways, they used to write like creepypasta stuff. And at some point 2 years ago, they started working on this game. It is it's hard to describe this without going into spoilers, but the first act of it is set up like a basic dating sim game. There are 3 girls you can pick a path for, and I honestly think they're all written well. There's there's Natsuki, the Tsundere, who seems like really cliched, but there's a few hints at some kind of nasty stuff in her life, like she might be the victim of an abusive father, but at the same time, she's really genuinely interested in manga, and she gets inspired by how she writes things with simple words for impact. There's the girl, I think her name was Yuri. I should have wrote down the names, but she seems like the quiet, proper one, but she's actually secretly into like horror and really dark stuff, and she's interested in just like, she also seems a bit troubled, but all she really wants is just to mostly be left alone with someone who can understand her a little. And the last character is the childhood friend character, who I'm going to go ahead and spoil this because I don't think it's really a spoiler. She suffers from depression. You find out at the end of Act 1, and I think they handled it fairly well, where she's kind of describing her headspace, even though the main character is a dumbass. But he doesn't make it worse. He's just sincere. He just doesn't know how to handle the situation. But he's doing it like that light novel protagonist way. But that's on purpose. I'll get to that in a sec. And like, all these characters are interesting. But the thing is, something happens at the end of Route 1 that just basically the game shows you the cards and then becomes something very different. Oh boy. Yeah, I've mentioned, basically this guy made a game where the first part of it is the actual game and the rest of it is the creepy pay stuff for the game. And it's like genuinely really well done. I'm honestly surprised they didn't charge for this because it's a really well put together title. It's interesting, but I also see a lot of people not liking it, and I kind of get why. But every time I see it, because like there's always going to be at least one guy who sees meta-narrative and thinks, oh, this is just pretentious and stupid, and I want to scream, existentialism, bitch, have you heard of it? God, I just want to write a gigantic article on this thing when I'm done, and I'm going to compare it to Homestuck constantly, and just point out how the ultimate villain is literally just the bad guy from Homestuck again, except kind of different, because I'm just terrible.
Yeah, I definitely need to check that out. I've been hearing about it, and I still haven't made the leap into trying it.
I would just be careful because it does get jump scare heavy, so I don't know how well you'll handle that. There's
Really?
a lot of disturbing imagery.
I can take imagery. I can take themes. Being startled, I hate.
Well, it does it in an interesting way because the entire game is still done within the graphical style of like a cutesy moe game. It's just things will sometimes not look right because the game looks like it's glitching out, or the art is misshapen in some way, or another part of a completely different picture that doesn't match the game style pops in, and it just trips you up. Which is like sometimes musical cues, sometimes just a complete lack of music. Yeah, I'm not done with it, but just be aware you will have to put up with some jump scares, and you'll see how you do with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really hope this person makes more weird stuff like this in the future, because this was like one of the most interesting games I've played in a long time. It's interesting because I'm normally not that much of a horror fan. Like, as far as I got in with horror games is like Nanashi No Game, that Japanese only horror game that was like, what if the Ring was a video game that Square Enix put out. And like, it had terrible controls, but it is worth it for just the first 3 levels because they will make you shit yourself. And of course Silent Hill. And like, I wouldn't really consider Resident Evil horror, but this year I've gotten 2 good horror games. This one and Stories Untold, which I did a podcast on IndieCent, which I highly recommend anyone with a good PC play. It is fantastic and 80s as hell. But yeah, that's what I've been looking at lately. How about we get to the main discussion?
All right.
Oh boy. Let me give you some background first so everyone's on the same page here. The Silver Case is the first game by developer Grasshopper Manufacture, group made by SUDA 51, who's worked on some other titles before this. Like, he did the story for that one Fire Pro Wrestling game that ended with the main character like committing suicide because SUDA 51.
Oh.
And this came out in October of 1999 for the PlayStation, followed later by Flower, Sun, and Rain on the PS2, which is actually a direct sequel to this somehow. I'll get into that, and so on and so forth until you got to No More Heroes, and then suddenly everyone in America knew who SUDA 51 was. Because, I mean, we got Killer 7, but nobody played Killer 7.
I played Killer 7. I played it on the GameCube.
Oh god, I remember the discourse in game magazines when that game came out, and they were just all like, how should we review this?
Yeah, all the reviews were bad, and for some reason I got it anyway. Because I guess that was how I was, and am, so.
It's just like everyone was like, okay, I think I should rate this bad, but I don't know. It was just that repeated infinitely, and the game reviewing has learned nothing since those days, since they're still reviewing on the same fucking metrics. Kill me.
I love Killer 7. I still think it's probably his best game.
Oh yeah, no argument here. It's like in my top 10.
Yeah, so
of, like,
it's
favorite games ever.
And apparently it's in the same trilogy as in the Silver Case, even though there's not really.
Well, quadrilogy is more like it.
Yeah.
They're called the Kill the Past games because they have the same running theme throughout them, and almost all of them have that phrase, Kill the Past, in it. It's the Silver Case, Flower, Sun, and Rain, and a series of mobile games called The 25th Ward that we will be getting next year, apparently.
Yeah.
In remade form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then it's Killer 7 after that. And I can definitely see how Killer 7 could possibly be canonical with this universe.
Oh, yeah.
Most of it takes place in America. And, like, everything we've seen in this game is so weird it would not be out of place.
And it has that computer-generated robot voice of, like...
oh, yeah, I think they reused that a lot for, like, No More Heroes.
Yeah, and the visual of the moon.
And then, of course, there's that doo-doo-doo sound.
Yeah.
That gets used in No More Heroes all the time.
So a lot of his motifs, no luchador mask, but I guess it was too early for that.
Yeah, this and Flower, Sun, and Rain don't have that. I don't think it starts until like Killer 7, where it's no longer just in Japan and he's allowed to let loose in the weirdness department.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to point out that this game we're about to talk about, it basically did everything Hideo Kojima did with Metal Gear Solid 2 years before that game came out. And also, I was surprised with just how much commentary it has about the internet.
Yeah.
That you can directly compare it to with Gatchaman Crowd's Insight.
Yeah.
And there's like over a decade in difference between them. And that's just wild to me. Like, SUDA 251 pretty much called the hellscape we were going to live in 1999.
Yeah, he did. And it's really weird because it came out in 1999, a lot of the conversations start out with like, what's a modem? Well, a modem is how you can access the internet. And then it immediately jumps to, okay, and this is what doxing is. So it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, he knew what he was talking about. I'm trying to place down all the influences this game has, and I know Cyberpunk is a big one. It's more downplayed here because, like, the start of the game, the first few missions don't have anything to do with, like, technology, but there are, like, little hints of the themes in there, like how the police unit you're in is especially brutal and it's basically covering up especially violent crimes, stuff like that. So it's hinting at it, but it's also mixing in a psychological horror element, like how the first chapter tricks you into thinking this game is going to be some sort of weird horror game where like criminals get like criminal ghost powers and stuff.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of confusing, somewhat contradictory symbolism.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what you come to expect from SUDA 51 until No More Heroes 2 happened, and then all of his work became boring.
Yeah. Hot
takes up in here.
Well,
yeah,
it's like it starts off apparently referencing like the some of the characters in the first or the chapter 0 or whatever are from the Moonlight Syndrome, which was the Twilight Syndrome game that he directed. So like it starts off with some characters that you might know. I found
then they die.
I guess the basic structure of it is basically it's a visual novel / adventure game. But for those who are like, oh man, those adventure games are so arbitrary and confusing, like all the password puzzles have like an auto solve button in the new game. So you don't actually have to like decode any long complicated password. And then
yeah, this isn't 999. You're not gonna get anything extra from solving puzzles here.
And there's like maybe 2 puzzles where you have to use an item in the game. So I mean, it's basically a visual novel. And it's
also really interesting because it's like a combination of trying to apply film technique to something that's not a film, and I think it succeeds. It's very weird. They call it film window in the game, like at the end of every episode, and the way it works is it has a normal visual novel setup. Instead of having like the bottom area where the text goes, we're putting the text over the screen over an image, or like character portraits and like background or CG or something. They have small windows with a scene playing either in CG or they have 2D art there. They have the text popping up at different parts of the screen for effects, so you have visual shorthand to know who's talking, and it creates this very strange, uncomfortable atmosphere, or like properly inviting feeling depending on what the scene calls for, and it's really impressive how they pull it off. And even some of the chapters have different color schemes to them. Like the parade chapter is all in black and white, and it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it's sort of an aesthetic made by budget limitations, and that seems to be clear in like the material I've read about it. That like, if he could have had a fully realized open world, he would have, but they didn't have that. They were a new company making a PlayStation 1 game, so yeah, you'll have like a picture of a guy talking on his police radio, and then a little cutscene of a rendered polygon car moving down a street, and then like another picture of maybe like a cow crossing the road, and then a picture of the guy, you know, braking his car, like, hey, get out of the road. I mean, that doesn't happen, but I don't want to spoil what actually does happen for people.
Yeah, we'll have a spoiler section.
So it's a very, yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting aesthetic. It's like very dated, but I don't know how you would update it and keep the same feeling.
Actually, they did update it.
Oh yeah, I guess they did. I mean,
yeah, remember this version we played? You can play both the original version and then the updated version.
Yeah, so I guess I did play the updated version. I'm just thinking of like, how would you make this like a 3D open world game or whatever? You know, you couldn't without. Not. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't see that working, especially with the story they ended up going with. I think it would just distract. And especially in an era where we have nothing but open world games, it feels like sometimes, and they're all just boring and terrible because nothing happens in them.
And you sort of have a 3D world that you can move around in, like with like tank controls, and you kind of move from like point to point. And
it's just awkward.
Yeah, it's all awkward, and it's dated, and it's like the initial impression, you know, that I got was like, oh, am I sure I want to do this? Sometimes, you know, playing old games can be extremely tedious sometimes.
Yeah, like the first chapter is not very welcoming because like that probably has the longest walking segment of the game. And nothing makes sense. There's like no good visual cues for anything.
Yeah, no.
And then after that chapter and the chapter in the part of the mall, you're pretty much good from there.
Yeah, no. The opening sequence, like you don't know any characters. Everything is dropped on you at once. It's confusing. The puzzles on the doors are like all these things you're supposed to have to translate, but like I said, you don't have to. But it's there. But the fact that it's there, but you don't have to do it, is so confusing. And there's like an inventory item you pick up that I guess helps you solve the puzzles if you actually solve them. Yeah, it's just not welcoming at all. So like, upon starting it, I was like, okay, is there any doing a Let's Play online that I can just watch?
You should have seen the original version of this since you didn't check it out. It is a mess to look at, but like in kind of a cool way. There's like this one screen that's just an all green line background with like a real photo over it, if I remember correctly.
So yeah, it definitely does not start off welcoming, and seeing somebody else play it and see that like it walks you through the interface, and there's like, it looks like it's just so complicated because there's people you have to talk to, there's items you have to use, and it's just like, ugh, how do I do this? All that drops away, and the actual game is very, I don't want to say streamlined after a point, but it's nowhere near as complicated seeming as it starts out, because it just starts out, yeah, the least welcoming way it could possibly start out. So, but I tell you, that passes. And it's actually fairly intuitive to get through the game.
Yeah, because at a certain point it just becomes mostly text, and you're more like watching or reading something, which I'm perfectly fine with.
Yeah.
Like not every game needs to be so heavy on like gameplay elements for me to enjoy it, especially like SUDA 51 stuff, because then you just get to take in all of his weird shit.
Yeah, when I came into it, I was expecting a visual novel, and then when it was like adding all these extra elements, I was like, I was just kind of expecting to read and maybe make a couple decisions. And it does end up like that, so just know what you're getting into.
Yeah, I'm trying to think here. Let's see. I wrote down a lot of notes. Oh yeah, I remember like the walking segments are especially bad because the camera angles make no sense.
Yeah.
Like whenever you're in the journalist apartment in the placebo chapters, you can never see the computer because the like little contact symbol is right in front of it when you get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just at a certain point I learned that if you just look for the contact symbol, that's basically the pay attention to this and then press the thing to continue button.
Yeah. So yeah, you're basically like, it makes you think it's almost going to be like a Phoenix Wright thing when you're in a crime scene. You're just going to have to look through everything. But it's not. It doesn't ever turn out that way. It's not like where you have to search everything in a room. There's basically like, when you get to the thing you interact with, there's a big neon sign that says, hey, interact with this. And then you do that. And then maybe on the other side of the room, the new neon sign says, interact with that. And so you go over and you do. And then, boom, more story. You know, it's...
Yeah, it's an efficient game.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Yeah, the people who helped remake this from the ground up understood that, like, asking people to play the original version was a terrible idea. So they're like, hang on, we'll just fix it by just gutting it and leaving everything people like.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that was a good call. And goddamn if they didn't make one beautiful HUD for this game. Like, that HUD really makes this something special. This is, I would consider, one of the best remakes of a game ever.
Yeah, there's the music and the color schemes and sort of animation of the text. Yeah, it's... And
all the moving shapes and stuff going on in the background. It really gets you involved. Like, I kept playing this game only at night because that seemed like the perfect atmosphere for what they set up.
Yeah, yeah.
And for the story contact too, because damn.
And like you were saying, there's one chapter that's basically all the drawings are in black and white, and the HUD is in black and white, and it all of the interface becomes part of the atmosphere because the interface is so intrusive. Anyway, they decided, let's make it part of the aesthetics.
Something I was surprised by is this was the first solo game Suda51 ever did. And it's probably the one that makes the most sense until his boring period, where he just went into full exploitation territory and just became terrible. But it's also probably the darkest thing he's ever made. Because boy, does this game go to some fucked up places.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially the life cut chapter.
Yeah.
Eesh.
Which is also the most tedious gameplay-wise. I don't know how
I'm not sure I'd call this the most tedious gameplay wise because I played Flower, Sun, and Rain.
Oh yeah, I started that after this. I haven't made it all the way through, but yeah, I mean, I guess
I'm gonna basically spoil it for when we get to the spoiler section, so heads up.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm the kind of person.
It's fine because it won't. It's fine because even when I explain it, it won't make sense.
Yeah, it won't make sense. I'm cool with that. But yeah, I guess Killer 7 had pretty fun gameplay. It was just very on rails.
That's because Shinji Mikami was in it.
Yeah, that's right. And then he also did there were a couple people helping him with that Shadows of the Dam that I really like.
Oh, I haven't heard good things about Shadows of the
Really?
Dam. Like, it has an all-star cast of people working on it, and then I just looked at gameplay footage, and the Talking Skull like says something in a thick Spanish accent.
Yeah, I mean,
and shooting happens.
All the monsters were designed by the manga of Dorohedoro in that. And I actually started playing it before I knew about Dorohedoro, but it's kind of an interesting yeah, that she was picked to design the monsters. It has its, like, all Suda 51 games have like gameplay like flaws, maybe put it like that.
That game didn't have that issue?
No, it does. It has very hard places where you just want to throw the controller down. But
oh no, then that's because the other person involved in the design, the guy who made God Hand. And if you've ever played God Hand, you'd understand why that game is Shadows of the Damned is so hard.
Yeah, yeah, and I did like the first No More Heroes. I think I didn't win the second No More Heroes, but I think I kind of enjoyed it. But I can kind of definitely see the
Yeah, I can say that the first No More Heroes is genuinely a masterpiece because it does a lot of weird stuff that doesn't mesh with like a general action game, like that one part where the bad guys steal your bike and you have to follow like a trail of blood,
yeah.
just walking around on the very empty open world map to get to the next area, and you don't even get a boss battle because he's killed by a completely different character you've never met before.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and it ends up, the entire story ends up being a rug being pulled out from under you as the player, and then it does the weird thing.
Yeah.
But like No More Heroes 2 is very straightforward. They try to do some of that stuff, like a little lip service, like after the rank 2 battle, and like Travis is talking to the camera about how fucked up it is to be killing these characters because he sees them as real and stuff like that. But it's all very minor compared to, here is rich guy with gun, that is his thing. Here is ghost guy with chainsaw, that is his thing. And that's just not as interesting. Like, it's way more fun to play, but it's way too streamlined and normal for me for it to stick out as like a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Which is weird because they included an actual Japanese exploitation film director as a cameo for the eulogy for one of SUDA 51's characters that died at the beginning of the game. And he gives you like the best sword. And it's just like he's actually voicing himself even in the American version, which is kind of neat. But like it's just too normal for SUDA 51.
Yeah.
And like in the period after that had this problem, like everything I've seen from Killer's Dead doesn't look interesting to me because even though there are some things of old SUDA I like in there, there's also the Gigolo missions.
Yeah, I think I heard about those.
Every time I bring up that game, someone always goes, no, it's this other guy who works at Grasshopper. I'm like, bitch, SUDA could just say no. SUDA wanted that in there, and you know it. SUDA is horny as hell. Even in this game.
Oh, yeah,
ridiculously horny.
That's pretty undeniable.
God, we need to talk about the basic plot and characters so I can fully explain how horny he is when we get to Chizuru. The basic premise is that when the game starts, you are a member of an elite police force who are investigating a crime that turns out to involve an escaped criminal named Kamui. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
What is it?
That is like
the serious crimes unit or the deranged crimes unit or?
I know the heinous crime unit.
Heinous crimes unit. Oh yeah.
Yeah, they come later. This is the first unit you're in. I think they're just like special task force.
Yes, yeah, there's special task force
But yeah, you're with this unit with your boss and 2 other people who work with you on the field, and you have this really messed up experience on the job where like one of the heinous crime unit's people, old detective named Tetsugoro Kusabi, basically saves your life after you thought you killed the criminal, and then they get up and the art portrait for some reason is like some sort of spooky ghost constantly screaming that he wants to kill you.
Yeah, crime ghost. Spirit of crime.
That's SUDA 51 mixing literal meaning and metaphors together, so you don't actually know what's literally happening, but it doesn't really matter for the sake of the themes and story he's telling. But at a certain point, you get frustrated, like, come on, please tell me. And then you get to Killer 7, where they have an entire book explaining the things that didn't get into the game that explain what's happening, and it makes it make even less sense. This is just classic SUDA, and I love it. It's so smart and stupid at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, basically, Tetsugoro warns you that you need to put down criminals like this and be more, have more of a spine. And then your next mission is going after an escaped criminal, Kamui, who is famous for like killing 7 people in this fictional city called the 24 Wards years ago, like all politicians. and pretty much your entire team is killed by him, and you're the only survivor. At this point, you find out your character is actually canonically mute because Tetsu and his partner Sumoi try to talk to you and they realize they can't, and then they give you increasingly ridiculous nicknames, including like Chinchilla for some reason, and just settle on Big Dick.
Yeah,
that is what most characters call you.
So yeah, after the initial chapters being a confusing train wreck, and then this guy just calling you Big Dick. That's the point. I'm like, is this just somebody playing this? It turns out the answer is no. But it does get better from there. But at that point you may feel like me and kind of think, ugh. But that by the end of that case, it completely turns around, and then it's by the end of that case, it's definitely like, this is the SUDA 51 that I remember. I will continue.
Yeah, that is a good starting case. I like the twist of it is that you find out Kamui isn't really the killer, but it's a woman named Ayami who we knew, who has him locked up in her closet with like a ball gag. And apparently she somehow killed your highly trained team in a forest. Okay. But there's a tense standoff with her. She's pregnant with Kamu's child. So forth. Stuff happens. And then you just forget about that plot for like 2 cases and have a plot revolving around a dead child, and then another revolving around a missing real estate tycoon. And then you hit Life Cut. And then you hit the internet episode, then Life Cut. And through all of this, you're also playing as a character named Tokyo in these segments called the placebo chapters.
Yeah, I guess to just break it down, there are like cases, there's Transmitter, in which you play as a character you name after yourself, aka Big Dick. And then there's the placebo cases, in which you play as Tokyo, who is a journalist. SUDA 51 wrote the Transmitter episodes, and his colleagues wrote the placebo ones. And I'm trying to get the colleague's name, Oka. So they basically came up with the cases, and then they're written from 2 different perspectives. And the placebo is, Transmitter is kind of in the heat of the moment. And then placebo is kind of like the guy collecting information about what happened, although it kind of diverges in a weird SUDA 51 game. I mean, there's no way you can describe, things always go off the rails, but that's kind of the basics of it. Like, in Transmitter you investigate a murder, and in placebo he finds out about a murder and then like asks around about it. It's an interesting way to, I guess, get the same information across, one from an insider perspective and one from an outsider perspective.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The cast includes in the heinous crime units you join Sumio and Tetsu, who I've already mentioned. Then there's Kishiyoshi Morikawa, this hippie-looking motherfucker.
Yeah,
who gives you a 100-question quiz at one point.
Yeah, and I passed it. Can you not pass it? It's really weird.
I think it's impossible to lose at it, because it's just like a really weird way to make you think about the facts of the case.
Yeah.
He doesn't really seem to do much in the game for the most part, except he's like doing stuff in the background, and that much is clear. And it's weird because it never fully explains what sort of faction or group, if any, he was involved in, because of what happens in Life Cut, which we'll get into later. But he's also dating Chizuru Hachisuka, the other detective on the force, who is a very uptight woman who's doing things more by the book than everyone else and is constantly annoyed that everyone looks down at her. But in the chapter with the dead kid, she's basically just fucking around, doing nothing, having daddy issues, makes a joke about having a period, and it's kind of become kind of clear that whole stuck-up woman thing is just like a big facade she puts on most of the time. And then you get the life cut, and Jesus.
Yeah, it's...
I'll get to her more. Let's see, there's also basically the boss, Morichika Nakagawa, I think that's how you pronounce it, who's just like really straight-laced and doesn't seem to do much other than just be the boss.
Yeah, kind of
And
what's Beat Takeshi kind of guy. He was wearing sunglasses and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that was the hippie-looking motherfucker.
Oh no, like the main guy wears sunglasses too. But the other guy, looks like there are two people wearing sunglasses. One looks like...
yeah, well, the one is the hippie guy. The really old guy is the chief of the unit, Shinji Kotobuki. He's also wearing glasses all the time.
Oh yeah, okay. That's right.
Yeah, but there's not much to say about him since he rarely does anything until life cut and then down.
Yeah.
Basically, it's kind of badly explained at first because just like the way SUDA 51 tells stories, but eventually pick up that they're basically in charge of burying particularly heinous crimes to keep the peace in the city. Which is really important later, and the main villain of the game, sort of, spoilers, is Kamui Uehara, the famous serial killer, who is locked in a closet within the first 2 chapters. As far as the placebo arc goes, you have Tokyo, who is looking into someone named the Bat, who seems to be after him, and a woman in his past, and one hacker he meets named the Slash. And they do various things within that story and don't really have much of an impact in the main one until life cut. Once again, spoilers for later. And I really like Tokyo because he has a pet turtle he named Red and shares a picture of the turtle with the bartender at the bar he goes to all the time. There's like, hey, look at my turtle. And the bartender freaks out like, that's your turtle? What? What's wrong with him? He's so ugly. You hurt my feelings. I'm going home. Actual quote. I should mention this game was translated mostly by Grasshopper at first, from what I can gather. So when I first played it, I don't think the translation was quite like finished, so to say. So there was like actual typos in places. There was just utterly bizarre sentence structure and word choices at a few points. And when I picked it up later, I'd never had any of these issues, just other than some, like, weird word choices, like using the word ridiculousness instead of absurdity or something like that. And like when they were quoting something, and like those day of word messages that Tokyo gets.
Yeah.
I was actually almost put me off continuing the game for a while until they seemed to have fixed it a little. Because, yeah, I noticed this back when that whole Persona 5 translation controversy was going on. I was like, oh, so that's how this happened.
I found the translation to be mostly good. It's just the light novel problem. There's just no editor ever. So I mean,
and of course, and then there's also the problem having to translate certain words a certain way so the meaning's clear, even though it doesn't really work in English.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, you have a lot of reading.
Yeah, one thing I noticed is that the name, the Silver Case, is like trying to like foreshadow something, like probably the way they spelled silver in the original version, but it doesn't like come across in translation. It's like silver, huh? That's an interesting word. I'm like, why is it interesting?
Yeah, because I just assumed like it was a silver case, as in, just like what Garcian carried in Killer 7, like a suitcase, right? A silver suitcase. But that's not what it means. But that's
you do actually figure out what it's referring to later, and I almost yelled when I found out. I was like, oh, this still doesn't make Flower, Sun, and Rain make any sense, but now I kind of get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as we mentioned, thematically, it's very cyberpunk. It's focused a lot on power dynamics, social trends, how things shift, in like a cultural atmosphere. I think one of the funniest parts is like during the life cut chapter, and like people are just talking about Kamui casually, and they're saying things you wouldn't really expect people to say, like that one clearly stoned man with the ridiculous hair who's just like, oh, I don't really know much about him. I mean, killing's wrong, but he has a goal, and I'm glad he's gonna do what he wants to get.
Yeah, there's a lot of full motion video in it. I mean, it's really like an old school adventure game in that full motion video. It's like a Night Trap kind of thing.
I really like those sequences, especially in like the Kamui Drome chapter. Do you get it?
Yeah, yeah.
Where they're like spying on the illegal footage of that idol in like her room.
Yeah,
and then it makes like it looks kind of creepy and weird, like it's supposed to, even though they're like characters clearly excited about it. And then it takes a hard swerve, and there's like this really cool like image where they fake VHS tricks and like digital corruption.
Yeah, and there's even an anime sequence in one of the cases.
Oh yeah, the parade chapter. That was actually in the original game. Like all the really cool black and white imagery we got in that one was originally just anime stills.
So it's like it is like, I mean, like Killer 7 in that it's broken up into chapters. Each kind of chapter kind of has its own thematic thing going on. It may kind of touches on something different maybe, and then there's anime cutscenes and sort of mixed media kind of come into a sort
and
of
then
aesthetic
like
goal.
even this goes to the menus where it's like a turntable, and it actually plays a different remix track for which depending on what you're selecting. Yeah, it's like little stuff like that. The Grasshopper really knows aesthetics, and the people who helped to make this version of the Silver Case really knew that and put their own spin on it, and I think they did a really great job. It's just all about making this mood and this feeling and making it absorbing and add to the text and the story you're seeing. I think they really got that, especially since so much of this game is focused on like urban development and stuff.
Oh, another thing I should add is that the different Transmitter and Placebo have different art styles completely. Like the Silver Case, the Transmitter chapters where you're doing the crime, everybody is drawn in like grayscale. Everybody kind of corpse looking almost. You know, because there's no skin tone to them. They're gray, black, and white. So it's a very creepy look to everybody. And then in Tokyo's chapter, they're kind of more a loose kind of scrawl, like somebody kind of drawn in a notebook. So it's kind of... So it's interesting when you see a character, maybe, if in each, game, you meet the same character.
Yeah, it's especially jarring with like Tokyo and Life Cut where he appears, and I didn't realize it was him because it looked like he had blonde hair in the art style now.
Yeah,
because it looked like Kanji Tatsumi.
Yeah, it's really an interesting effect.
Yeah, but then I really like the 2 epilogue chapters they added to this game that like sequel bait the later 2 sequels. Especially the one with Tokyo where you actually see his full hair, and yes, it is black. But it's also spiky. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
And that presumably leads off into Flower, Sun, and Rain.
Yeah, that one goes to Flower, Sun, and Rain, where he's a character in it, and a very important one. And while the other one goes into the 25th Ward, which I'm not familiar with since it was a series of cell phone games.
And yeah, that's what's coming out as a remaster, I guess. Yeah, that's what's coming out. I guess with the remake next year.
Yeah, we're getting that next year is what they announced. I'm excited for it. As long as it's anything like this, just bizarre. You'll also notice that both of those epilogue chapters reflect the art style of those games more than this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like with the heavy focus on really sharp whites for the 25th Ward prologue, and then the prologue for Flower, Sun, and Rain is really colorful. Like little touches like that. It's nice. I like that they care so much about these old games that they wrote entirely new story segments for both of them that kind of tie a thematic knot we didn't have before.
Yeah.
Although that prologue for Flower, Sun, and Rain does bring up some questions. Jesus fucking Christ, that game. Anyways, let's go by each of the chapters and then we'll get into spoilers with Life Cut. Because, I mean, at that point, it's just all spoilers.
Yeah.
Okay, what would you say your favorite chapter of these was? Let's pick one from... actually, the way Placebo is set up, we can just talk about that separately because it's kind of its own ongoing story instead of a series of segments. So we'll just go like our favorite in the transmitter and then talk about Placebo after.
I would probably...
Parade,
yeah.
I'm gonna go with Kamui Drome, but yeah, Parade is a close second for me.
Yeah, Katamari Drone would be second for me, so we're not too far apart.
Yeah, no offense to the kid chapter, I think it was really good with some of the stuff they did, but like the commentary in Parade and Kami Drome just like is so spot on. It's kind of scary, especially for the year this game came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with Parade and then get into Kami Drome since they're kind of interconnected.
So we go into spoilers on this, or?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that thing. Just don't mention the end of Parade and we should be fine.
Okay, yep. Parade's sort of the black and white one. So it's a very striking visual case. It begins with Sumio telling the old grizzled detective a fairy tale in the car, and then you walk up, Big Dick, and you're asked to do a tour of this house that they've been staking out for like the last case. While you were doing the last case, they've been at a stakeout. It would kind of cross cut. So you do a loop around the house and then get back in the car and then it immediately explodes. And it turns out it was the house of a leader of a giant conglomerate who is now missing. And so the heinous crimes unit kind of gets rolled into another investigatory unit to try and find this hostage.
Yeah, it was like a unit of all really old detectives who don't want to do all this newfangled bullshit. Yeah, that like one really nice detective that Tetsu really didn't like. He just constantly apologized about everything and was generally very courteous, and like Tetsu at one point was like, just go put a sword in your gut. I have to mention that Tetsu is probably one of my favorite SUDA 51 characters ever because most everything that comes out of his mouth is terrible.
Yeah, he definitely made an impression. But anyway, so you're kind of doing sort of hostage negotiation. Everything kind of falls on you because you're the giant youth guy. That you're the one that will be delivering the ransom for the case, and they're trying to figure out sort of the motive of why this guy would be captured, and it basically is traced back to sort of environmental pollution that took place in a rural town, and that's actually very similar to the sort of real case of environmental crime in Japan with sort of the whole Minamata disease, where like there was a mining, I think it was a Chiso corporation that was mining and was like dumping mercury in a town. If you look that up, there's like, it's actually called Minamata disease because of the people who would become so sick from the mercury poisoning. So it kind of echoes that, and you're basically trying to figure out who the people are responsible for, trying to kidnap this guy. Yeah.
The kidnapping. I like how the threatening messages they send in video just have this like sex doll in the corner, and at one point they pour water.
Yeah, it is really
so
weird,
but also creepy.
And it's also a good thing because that's one of the things where you actually have some inventory usage. There's some gameplay in that chapter too.
You use a thing on the thing, and that's the gameplay.
You also have to look up and look down. I think the biggest biggest thing in this game is you need to remember that you can look up and down using the mouse wheel. Because like in the introductory chapter, there's manga volumes hidden all around, and you can find them by looking.
Yeah, those are neat.
Yeah,
I could also find them in Life Cut.
What's so interesting is that for such a rudimentary interface, looking up and down is like incredibly important to progressing the game.
Speedrunners keep that in mind. But yeah, the parade chapter is just like aesthetically striking, but it touches up on some pretty significant political issues that are becoming way more prevalent today. And it's interesting to just see them echoed from an old case reference in this 1999 experimental Japanese game. And I also really love some of the stuff they do, like that fairy tale at the beginning where it devolves into Sumio just describing a basic murder case. And Tetsuo just keeps reacting like a child, like, oh, fuck that serpent.
Is that where he lost money gambling?
Well, that's not a good story. Oh, he's always losing money gambling. No, it ended with him describing that some people got together to beat up someone else and kill them because they hurt someone close to them. And then Tetsuo was like, that is not a good story. I just love him. He reacts to everything with just like this. So I've seen all this shit before. Non-seriousness. Just like says something terrible to someone, and everyone's just like used to it at this point. And he's definitely earned it the more you learn about him as the game goes on. Yeah, it's a great chapter with him and Sumio. Why the chapter before had more of, well, sort of more of Chizuru and her partner. They just fuck off and do their own thing, and they're just like, hey, you go deal with this, I don't want to. As far as Kamui Drone goes, if you couldn't tell by the title's very obvious reference, it's partly about media, but in this case, the internet. This case starts up when they find out about this strange website called KamuiNet. It's just as stupid as you're thinking it is. It's basically a place where a bunch of people roleplay murders with each other in a sexual way. And you actually see one session, and it's just kind of adorable to me nowadays because I'm just so fucking broken. It's like, oh, we should reference this case. Oh man, you're gonna die. And what's going on is this person calling themselves Old Man is basically trolling this chat because he's a hateful, spiteful, egotistical dick, you know, like you do on the internet. And he ends up meeting a girl named Neutral, and they form basically just like a mini cult in a matter of days. And just like all the old people at the police station are just reacting to this dumb bullshit. Except it turns out they really do something, and I won't spoil what they do, but it's kind of important for what follows in Life Cut. But basically the entire chapter is a long series of commentaries on how the internet is impacting modern life, how there's this big generational gap that no one knows how to handle, and just kind of ruminating on how humans function. There's this one really great sequence where the boss guy basically describes this case he assigns you to go on to look for a missing girl, and he's describing it like some sort of twisted fairy tale where she finds this magical land, an internet message board, and ends up being corrupted by it. And it's like really well done with these cool full motion video segments. Like that also has the idol sequence in it, which is just striking and very unsettling, and there's this whole foreboding sense of dread throughout the entire chapter because you know something is going to happen. And what happens isn't what I was expecting, but it's interesting just how much this chapter perfectly captures all this paranoia and worry that ended up popping up with Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear Solid 2 like 2 years later. Like, everyone constantly brings up that game and, like, how it predicted the information age. But if the Silver Case ever got an English translation back then, this would I would really hope this would have gotten a lot more attention, because it nailed it.
Yeah,
it's like everything.
The only thing dated about it is sort of the technology. Instead of like the idea of chat rooms, it's like a very, well, I mean, the visuals are like a very early version of the web, where it's like there's like a little.
Oh, yeah, there's like GIFs everywhere.
So I mean, it looks dated, but the fact that you go in these chat rooms and you're just immediately set upon by all these angry trolls is just like, yeah, you figured it out.
There's a lot of going on the computer in the placebo chapters too, but since Tokyo is an old fart for the most part and doesn't give a shit about all this, he just has basic email and a chat room he uses sometimes. I love the, like, for his chapter after the internet chapter, he actually goes on a chat room looking for information on, like, KamuiNet, and when he enters, he's just like, hey guys, what button do I press to send private messages? And they're all like telling him to fuck off or they'll kill him. And it's like, huh? Come to my house and say that, you fuck. He like threatens one of them physically. He's like, just come to my house, and then he doxes himself. And they're all like, is this guy serious? He's so good. And he like names himself Turtle Guy. God, he really needed his own game. I would have followed him to like hell and back. Give this man his own series. But Flower, Sun, and Rain World isn't enough because that game is nonsense. I could just kind of wish there was something a bit more aesthetically interesting about this chapters, because it just mostly sticks to what worked before until you get to the part where Old Man and Neutral put on their cult gear and suddenly look like they just stepped right out of Shin Megami Tensei 3.
Yeah, Shin Megami Tensei, that's exactly the aesthetic.
I honestly thought that was actually drawn by the SMT3 art guy, and now I'm curious if that was the case. Because if it wasn't, damn, they got it spot on. It has like a fucking barcode on his forehead, which was actually a really nice touch because of all that Y2K and paranoia going over barcodes. And like Neutral had like a little raindrop thing. And they never appear again after that chapter. Great designs wasted. But I think it perfectly sums up how nerds would present themselves as like some sort of powerful new coming on the fucking internet. It was just like, yeah, this is how the world's gonna end. Bunch of dumbass nerds are gonna dress up and cosplay and like do something stupid. The placebo chapters are different. They're just all from Tokyo's perspective, and he's just doing this assignment for like the father of someone he used to know. He's being hunted down by this bat guy who comes back around after the internet case. During that investigation, he has a friend named Slash who he actually does point out has the exact same names like the guitarist from Guns N' Roses at one point, who just like does internet stuff for him, and he's just mainly going around and giving his own thoughts on stuff. About the only heinous crime unit person he interacts with, besides your character at one point, which was a jump scare and just like tells you to fuck off, is whenever he needs information, he goes to Tetsu, and their dialogue is magical. Hey, what's the deal with that slappy nuts guy? Who the fuck is that? Oh, you mean Big Dick. The greatest dialogue ever written.
It's really bizarre, and it kind of dances around the kind of simple exposition you might expect.
Yeah, they just do not mesh well, even though they're basically kind of the same in a lot of ways. Just shitbags. I just really like his dialogue for the most part, and all his musings he writes down in his private journal he keeps on his computer. I also really like that whole daily word thing where it's foreshadowing things that are going to happen, and they keep quoting people like they quote Kant at one point. I was like, oh, you're really quoting that guy, huh? Fucking email Kant. I can't escape him. I'm taking a philosophy class right now, and we just had a whole big thing on Kant, and I actually went on about him a little for like talking about ethics for one thing at one point, and just say his name there and like, oh fuck. That wordy motherfucker. But yeah, I think at this point we should get into spoilers because that's where the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
So the Life Cut chapter is a very accurate title. Oh god, Life Cut. Where should we start with this?
Well, I guess to start off, sort of, we had some culling of the cast, with Sumio being arrested, and
right, he was the one.
Tokyo has kind of disappeared.
Yeah, like Sumio was partly responsible for the events and parade, so he was arrested. Although they don't make it that clear in Kamiodrome, because him and like Tetsu are still talking. They don't make it clear they're like talking on a phone or something. I never got that. Like there's a one point in the batting cages in the car that kind of confused me. But yeah, it makes it clear after that he is in jail. So at that point, Kamui is back because at the end of Kamiodrome, they did a worldwide blackout for like a minute, and in that time, Kamui got to escape prison, and murder started happening. And like we open up with like a big news report about the new murders and getting opinions from people on the street, where we see the funny-haired guy, and then we go back to our unit. We get two new people. One who's just going to get killed off pretty easily for just being a normal dumbass. And the other one who I think goes on to become one of the main characters in Ward 25. And they go after Kamu, and you talk with all the various characters on this mission to go trap him on the top of this tower, where they do a really showy public execution to just wipe out the entire concept of Kamui as some sort of deity or someone to respect from public consciousness. And while you're doing that, you run up with Tokyo, who mentions that he knows everything now and gives you instructions throughout the chapter. When he passes you, you meet Tetsu, who's has actually killed the chief of your unit, and is now on the run. You run into Chizuru, and I keep forgetting his name because he's just
Morikawa.
He's just so unimportant. Crap. Oh no, wait, I got it right here. Yeah, Morikawa. Morikawa's going after him, and Chizuru might be going after both of them, and she's very excited about it, kind of creepily excited. You're like, damn, lady. and then you see this really cool sequence where all these snipers basically shoot Kamu at the same time. And then you find out the truth behind Kamu, and shit just gets weird and weird and weird. Oh god, I don't even know where to start explaining all this. There's just so much.
It may not be possible to do it all without just reciting the entire game, because it goes back to the shelters in the second case, or the first case, and then the kids in the second. And
yeah, what's basically going on is many years before the events of the game, there was this experimental program going on revolving around these shelters where kids were raised by one of these political groups that are fighting over the 24 wards. And this is where Kamui and Ayame come from. Like, you get hints at this early on when you're talking with Abad in the placebo chapters, and he mentions he's an Ayame fan and not the Kamui fan, which is weird. But you find out that Kamui and Ayame are basically sociological tools used by this one group when they need to get something in their little power struggle, or they need to cause some sort of chaos. And so they just use one of these kids as sort of like a sleeper agent. And that is where everything just goes crazy during the first Kamu murders. You don't find out until later the absolute truth, but Tetsu was there. He stopped that Kamui. But then he saw that he had silver eyes that all these old men who were there fought over, so Kamui never actually got around to killing them. They ended up killing themselves to get these eyes, and only the mayor of the city got them and basically became immortal somehow through these eyes, these silver eyes. And this is what everything's started to center around. Except for that one other thing with the programmer, which is where things just go fucking insane.
Yeah, the silver case is from the silver eyes.
Right.
Although
and
there's like misdirection all along the way about what the silver case actually is.
yeah, it's basically revolving around these eyes. It's never really made clear why this assassin had those eyes, but it might have just been by complete accident. But at some point, Tokyo ended up getting one of these eyes, and the other one went to who we turn out to find out is his dad, and making him Chizuru's brother. Their dad, the mayor, who killed his own son to continue hiding with his new immortal life in public, because this is ridiculous. But basically, I'm sorry, this all sounds ridiculous, but we're not done. The bare bones of it is that everything's revolving around this magical power of immortality that, of course, all the old power-hungry people want. And but the actual structure of the city is handled by this programming nerd named Nezu, I think it was. And you actually learn his name post-mortem, because at the end of Life Cut, you just see this fat otaku nerd with like a bunch of titty anime wallpapers on his computer, just spinning in a desk chair, and then Tetsu's like, shoot him.
Yeah, it's a weird ending.
It's like, what? But yeah, he is the inventor of this structure, and partly the inventor of the shelter program with the 1,400 boys and 1,400 girls that are possible Kamui and Ayame candidates. And he basically just does what he wants. He sends out Kamui when he wants, just for fun, and he uses everyone like toys until you finally kill him. But in the process, you find out that you yourself are a possible Kamui, and Chizuru is a possible Ayame, and Tokyo is also a possible Kamui. And at a certain point, I just in my head was that scene with all the Squidwards and SpongeBob, and it's like, you're Kamui, you're Kamui, you're Kamui, I'm Kamui. Is there anyone here who's not Kamui? And then just a cat meowing with like silver eyes in it. It's like that's what it felt like.
It doesn't make any literal sense at all. It's like, as best as you try and explain it, it's just like you have to play it almost to like
the thematic sense is like we're being controlled by powers who want to use us for their own ends and will dispose of us however they wish, and the only way you can free yourself from that is to, quote unquote kill your past. Basically become more than what made you. Like Sumio basically orchestrating the death of the person who destroyed his village, you killing the programmer who basically created your existence, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And it's very interesting. It rings true. It's just covered in all this weird shit. And it gets even weirder when you get the explanation to what the silver eyes are in Flower, Sun, and Rain. And this is not a joke. They come from like magical rare hyenas. That's it. They come from magical rare hyenas, and they allow the person who has them to body jump. And the island hyenas are now stored on Los Pass is artificially made for the sole purpose of making more of these silver eyes. And the island has a cloning facility, and the main character of that game is a clone of Sumio for some reason that's never explained. And also, Tokyo might have accidentally started a time loop when he went there with his silver eye and met the locals. And there's an assassin there named Sundance Shot, actual name, who has silver eyes, who's possibly the clone of the dead assassin Kamu from the first silver case, making him the new Kamu on this island. Do you see how none of this sounds like it makes sense? And that doesn't even get into the fucking Catherine ghost thing, like the pink alligator stuff. Like if you go on Wikipedia and see the silver, like the Flower, Sun, and Rain plot summary, it does make sense of a lot of this, but it never once mentions what the fuck is up with that Catherine thing.
Yeah, like Catherine was a blonde girl on the plane, and then now it's a computer.
Yeah, she appears in a lot of flashbacks or like side flashes throughout Flower, Sun, and Rain, and has like a pink alligator she's chasing. And it's also like the name of your suitcase. Okay. But yeah, Flower, Sun, and Rain is a whole other pile of worms, but...
Yeah, I started playing that, and it seemed interesting. All the puzzles involved entering numbers into things, which is just really weird.
The puzzles are actually really fun in that game. It's just like getting to point A to point B gets ridiculous because of this running theme of like the time loops and trying to get to this destination you can never reach because something always blocks your way or complicates things. And so it makes your journey as like cumbersome as possible before it goes crazy. But yeah, it's sort of like the open world in No More Heroes, where it's like they had a good idea, but they made it really too frustrating to like deal with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't get that here because especially for the remake, where there's just like, okay, let's just gut out the game part, which was definitely a good call. But basically, I like how each of the stories end. Your story ends with you finding this out, killing the programmer, and going on with your life. Basically, I think you're still technically kind of on the police force at the end. You're just like helping one of them out as like a secret agent.
Yeah, because it sounded like there was a new thing with the Trump people or whatever, and that's unrelated. In Japan, Trump means playing cards, like Western playing cards.
Yeah, like there are these 4 playing card themed guardians for the Kamui facility, but Tetsu kills them all off screen and you find their bodies. And then
in the most horrible sequence where you have to go through like 15 towers.
It was horrible until I figured out you can just hold the arrow key and hold the little arrow button and you'll go in that direction forever for like really fast.
It was just like going through all those rooms and looking for shit. It was just, it was obnoxious, but
yeah, I
get survived.
That was a little much until you realize you don't need to go to all the towers.
I didn't have a list of which towers were the right ones to go.
Oh no, the list was right there. Remember, it gives that math equation. Those numbers are the towers. Just go to them in the order they're presented.
Oh. Okay.
Whoops.
Whoops.
But yeah, so like there's like a Joker one that they found out about at the end of this prologue, but your character might not be alive for the 25th ward from what I'm gathering, because he's just shot by a crazy fucking nut job on the police force. It's just like, yeah, I'm ready to die. What? Dying's bad? Okay. It just has like the creepiest looking design. Like, it's very normal to the point that it becomes abnormal. Just like a guy you don't want to meet. I wouldn't be surprised if he's like one of the Kamui kids either. The way he's talking, it's all like he's been conditioned. So I'm interested to see where that goes. But I really love the end of the placebo chapter before the prologue for Flower, Sun, and Rain, where he has these voices of like the bats and past Kamui victims in his head now. Someone is trying to manipulate him to kill your player character, and I think it's implied to be the mayor character. It's never made quite clear, but that would be the only one that made sense since the programmer's already dead, and he would be the one who would know the programmer. And he also calls him his son, so... But he decides not to and just tells the voices in his head to go fuck themselves after this really well done series of conversations with like the bartender and the woman he loves, as he's trying to figure out what his life means now that he understands he was literally predestined for something, but he also has a choice whether to go through with it or not. Yeah. And I just love that little ending moment where he tells that voice to fuck off, and you get this really nice illustration of him looking back, like determined to continue on. Yeah, good ending for him. It's like, that was just like a perfect way to end the game. If that's how the entire game ended, I would have thought that was perfect. They didn't need to do the prologue chapters, so I'm glad they did. But I'm kind of frustrated that the final chapter for Transmitter before the prologue chapters is just a deadpan explanation of what the silver case was from Tetsun. It's like, hey, do you have $4,000?
Yeah.
Oh, and they also mentioned that there's another Kamui killing, like the mayor's dead, and you're thinking, oh shit, that's serious, but I don't think it's followed up on in like any of the games after. Oh well.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out in the 25th ward, but
no, I don't think that game even brings it up either, because it's taking place in a new ward.
Oh, I guess that's a good point.
It is connected, but I don't know much about them since they were cell phone games and only in Japan, so almost nobody knows anything about those games to begin with. I remember when the Kingdom Hearts cell phone game came out, and literally nobody remembers anything about it other than it existed. Oh, what a mess. But yeah, this was interesting. I'm trying to put down the influences for this, because I mean, there's some obvious ones like Kamui Drome. I mean, obviously. I'm trying to figure out if there's like some David Lynch in here. What was Lynch doing around this time?
He had just done Lost Highway and would be doing Mulholland Drive in the next couple of years. So
I'm trying to figure it out because I know The Killer 7 takes a lot from David Lynch and like Tarantino in this weird mixture. But
so it's a lot of noir stuff with
but this
whole black and white.
But this one seems to go more for like some light cyberpunk. It seems a lot inspired by like the OVA boom from that era, and all like the hyper violence and strange mature animes that were coming out at the time. That would explain the starting chapter with the ghost criminal.
Yeah, that was from Moonlight Syndrome, from Twilight Syndrome, which was a horror visual novel game. Apparently it ended with the protagonist being killed. I guess that's her head being carried in the Lunatics chapter.
Okay, that would explain, because SUDA51 likes to mention like past games of his a lot. Like in the main character of Killer 7 actually appears in No More Heroes in the ending, trying to kill you as a new like Assassin War starts. And then for the true ending, he just gets killed off by Henry for no real reason before you have the final boss battle. But it's weird because it's clearly not the same character, because he's acting nothing like him and he's using a sword. Yeah, there's just like a lot of weird cameos like that in his work. trying to think what Flower Sun Rain did, but I guess that's just one gigantic silver case cameo when you get down to it. It's just like a gigantic mountain of, do you remember this? Every few minutes. And I didn't notice any of it at first until after playing this game, like, oh. Tetsu actually appears in that game as the guy who hires that clone Sumio to go to the island to do the job. And you don't find out until the end of the game. And that's hilarious to me. Like, why would you write that?
Just reading here, it says Moonlight Syndrome. It was him doing more horror instead of, it was apparently ghost stories before he did it. He made it more like, violent, crazy people. So he probably a big horror fan as well, although he doesn't really, it never really follows through on the horror.
Yeah, I think he's more interested in the thematics of horror than, like, the actual horror parts. Like, you can see bits of it in here, like that jump scare where, involving your player character knocking on Tokyo's door. There's the entire Kamui Drome chapter, which slowly builds sort of like a technology-themed horror story in a lot of ways. And of course, like, it's referencing Videodrome, I mean, obviously. And of course, there's the dead kid chapter where you actually see the ghost of the dead kid that kind of kicks all this off. But it's more just about... I actually saw this one really good video series by a YouTuber named MC Prophet a few years back, explaining some of the themes of No More Heroes, and he mentioned something important that I think puts a lot of this in perspective. SUDA 51 used to work as a gravedigger. Like, he worked with corpses and funeral stuff for a significant chunk of his life, and a lot of his work seems to revolve around him reflecting a bit on death. So I think when he so that tends to work its way into a lot of his stuff. Like how those videos describe No More Heroes as a sort of criticism of video game violence by slowly starting out as a very open, video gamey, haha, we're gonna have fun thing, and then having a scene near the end of the game where, like, Bad Girl's body is being stabbed through your sword and she's just, like, wailing on you as blood's pouring out of her. And it's the most disturbing, grotesque thing in the entire game, and it's like at that point the game's making it very clear what it's doing. It's like, if you put it in that perspective, a lot more starts to make sense about some of the choices in this game. He's using abstract ideas, something horror loves to do, to say something he wants to say, but he says it in a really weird, awkward way in the process that kind of gives off a different meaning and a different feeling. Yeah, so, like, this is more in the thriller category, but sometimes it goes into, like, psychological horror at points, or you see an odd trope that shouldn't be in the genre, like when Chizuru's, like, sitting on a fucking bench with a cocktail dress with a gun pulled on you before she gets shot.
Yeah, from what I'm just reading on the Wikipedia page, he says he does not a fan of the horror genre. He incorporated visual references from Metropolis, Gattaca, Heat, and Seven, which is just Wikipedia, and so it doesn't have a citation on that, but I could see those.
Yeah, I could definitely see Seven in there. And that makes a whole lot more sense than Type Kubo from Bleach explaining that he really liked like that one heist movie. What was it? I forget. Yeah, Suda 51's an interesting nut to crack because he likes so many things that don't seem to mesh together, and then he makes games meshing the things together, and then this happens. I love
this is definitely sort of a Rosetta Stone to understanding a lot of stuff in Killer 7.
Oh yeah, Killer 7 is just utter madness, and like it makes a whole lot more sense playing through this game and getting some of the ideas that Killer 7 really did not make clear at first.
Yeah, in a way, this is almost like a first draft to Killer 7. There are enough differences, but I mean, like, interesting to see where the ideas came from. Yeah, the conspiracies, the
use of spirits. the monsters that don't seem to fit with the world, the magical item that kind of drives everything in the background. In that game would be the God Hand that the bad guy uses. And of course, both him and like the old Smith are technically gods, just kind of playing around with the mortals.
Yeah.
So you have two different situations. You have Killer 7, which is very focused on the American political system and creates this complicated conspiracy based around voter fraud and cultural manipulation. And then you have this game over here, which is very domestic, Japanese focused. Like, the same problems don't exist, and it's more interested in like how business impacts cities and urban development than how government out of control impacts democracy. So you have you have like the programmer treating the entire city like a Sim City game, for example.
Yeah. What's interesting is I also thought it was pretty appreciated was one of the factions was called the Tech faction, and with how Silicon Valley is pushing politics in maybe some bad directions, that also seemed pretty resonant. I would just say, definitely if you're a Suda 51 fan or you're a big Killer 7 fan, I think you really can't miss Silvercase.
Oh yeah, this is absolutely central to even understanding Killer 7.
I would say, like, if you're not a big Suda 51 fan, you probably won't, you might not enjoy this, but definitely if you are a big Suda 51 fan, then it's really not possible to skip out on this, because this is really his first time not being given a scenario that he didn't really care about. Because it sounds like when he was given other things, he's kind of like, I'm going to take this in my own direction. Both with the horror game.
Here's a pro wrestling game. The main character, like, sees his girlfriend die and kills himself. Okay.
And then he's given a horror game, and he doesn't even like horror, so he kind of makes it his own thing. And then here he's like, okay, I'm going to start my own company. This is what I'm going to do. And it's really a case of them working with a small budget and trying to make... Apparently one of the reasons Tokyo's cases are so much more text is just because of the storage. Most of the storage was taken up for the transmitter case, and so that left a lot more text to be done for the other side. So
I think it works fine for the type of story they were telling, especially with all the narration. Would have been nice to get better pictures of Tetsu during the dialogue scenes, though, because you just like use a distant shot of him exiting the building, and it's hard to tell it's him at first.
Yeah, and that in a different style, it was really hard to tell sometimes.
I'm wondering how many artists worked on the art for this game, because there's a lot of different styles going on. I wanted to tell by the credits, but the original credits were all in Japanese, and the new credits were mostly for the people who did the conversion, which was annoying. But yeah, that's the basics of it. I would recommend this to like anyone who's really into visual novels. If you want to expand your palette a bit, this is the game you want to start with, because you're never going to play anything like it, I promise. I'm really impressed by that film window thing and hope they would like go back to it one day, because I think it does a lot with the genre I've never seen done before. I'm so used to like text doing all the heavy lifting, because all the art is so simplistic and it's just there to give the basics for using your imagination. But this makes everything feel much more grand, and just like with simple tricks taken from film, and I'm like, that's really impressive. I'm surprised they pulled it off. Like, this was the first game Grasshopper ever released, and I think this is like the perfect first game for such a weird studio. I wish they'd go back to more stuff like this, like generally experimental, and less, let's have Suda 51 self-insert fuck the lady.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is what I wanted to share. Suda 51's The Silver Case. I would consider this one of my favorite games ever already. I'm just not sure how high yet, because it's definitely not going to top Killer 7, but this is so weird and interesting and like genuinely well put together that I think it's something that deserves to be remembered by history. And that's just my take on it. I'm glad I shared it with someone who could appreciate it the way I do.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed it. Like I said, the introduction was really rough for me because I didn't know what I was getting into. Like I said, it drops you the first case with the number 0 drops you in. No explanation, just kind of throws everything on you, then throws the interface on you, and then it's really overwhelming. But it really starts getting interesting, and even some of the quirks of the interface eventually become sort of part of the essential experience. Like when you're at home and you walk up towards the TV and it shows a weird reflection of you. It's just little weird things like that. Because whenever the picture of your player character is shown, you're always looking really kind of creepy looking. So yeah, it has some really
that's
interesting
actually
stuff.
technically foreshadowing, considering
Yeah.
the big reveal that you are the Kamu.
Yeah. Yeah, once I saw what's his name with the ball gag, it was kind of like, oh yeah, this is SUDA 51.
Oh my god, that explains the weird ball gag. Kamui was the ball gag guy in Killer 7, wasn't he?
I get it.
And
yeah.
also, technically, the other guy that the ball gag guy also was. So, Killer 7 is a sequel to the Silver Case.
And the other really interesting thing was when you're like in that shopping mall and you bring Tokyo down, and then like there's like a shadow on the ground of a woman, and I couldn't figure out what to do. And I looked up a walkthrough and it was like, look up. And as soon as you do, you see the woman like fall down on you. That was pretty cool. I wish I had figured that out myself.
Yeah, I was confused by the mall segment myself, but yeah, it's.
But yeah, it's just such a cool little idea.
And you just got to give credit to the people who remastered this. This is just a perfect remake if I've ever seen one. It perfectly captures what worked from the original version and just adds to it in just like all these cool subtle ways. I would highly recommend this, no question. It's like $20 on Steam. It's also on PS4. I'm not sure how good that port is, but I'm sure it's fine. If you like weird, strange narrative games, you need to play this one. And that would be it for our first episode of A Rainy Day Chat. Next time, we'll talk about whatever we want with whoever's there, but I'm planning right now to help Whitley with an episode on Okame, the classic Clover Studios Zelda-like, so look forward to that. Maybe that'll be the next episode, maybe it won't. We'll find out later. Any last words?
Not really. I would just definitely check this out if you're a SUDA 51 fan.
Alright, and that will be it for this episode. Thank you for coming, everyone.